Well, welcome everyone to a very interesting and topical discussion on how IT admins can persevere despite economic uncertainty. My name is Chase and I'll be your host, and I'm joined today by an amazing panel to bring together several different viewpoints as we look at different tactics, mental models you can adopt within your teams and your organizations. On our panel today, we have Rajat Bhargava, who is an entrepreneur, investor, author, and co-founder of JumpCloud. An MIT graduate with over 2 decades of high-tech experience, Raj is a 10-time entrepreneur with 6 exits, including 2 IPOs and 4 trade sales. We also have Michelle DeBella, JumpCloud CFO and newest executive, joining us with experiences that span HP, Uber, and Lyft. She's been recognized as an industry leader by the Professional Businesswomen Council of California and was named one of 2019's 50 most powerful women in technology by the National Diversity Council. And finally, we have Gary Reiner, an operating partner at General Atlantic and JumpCloud board member, providing strategic support and advice to the firm's investment teams and portfolio companies, focusing on strategy and technology. Before joining General Atlantic in 2010, Gary was Senior Vice President and CIO at GE, where he led the mergers and acquisitions, sourcing, and IT and operations teams for the company. Thank you all for joining us today and sharing your perspectives.
Thanks for having us, Chase.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chase.
So, as we look to start today's discussion, we look to the second half of the year. Our community of IT admins are looking at how they can prepare and persevere as the economic environment begins to contract and become a little bit more uncertain. When the pandemic hit in 2022, there was an immediate economic shift, but there was also a dramatic shift in how the world works. As the economic environment changes again, we wanted to take a broad view from a couple different perspectives on what tips, tactics, and approaches still hold true and what might be different this time around. So with that, I'd like to open up to the panel and start our discussion. And for those that are tuning in, please feel free to submit some questions through the questions tab, and we'll bring that into our panel to answer as well. So Raj, you were first up on the screen, so we'll start with you. You are an experienced operator across many different economic changes throughout your career. And with each cycle, they come and go, but what are some of the lasting impacts that you've seen?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I'm always an optimist, right? So even during difficult times, I think there's a lot of interesting opportunity, and if you look at it the right way, that opportunity kind of surfaces. So I think we have a slide on one of the things that I created around, if you go back and look at each one of the major recessions, at least that I've been a part of. So I am a little bit old, but not too old. So hopefully got through a few of these. But you look at, I think every single time there's been a challenging economic environment, there's also been, I think, a corresponding kind of inflection point in something. So, and we can argue about whether these are right or wrong or whether they're on track, off track. But I think in general, it's pretty easy to say, during each one of these major recessions or downturns or whatever you want to call it, there was some pretty significant opportunity. So I think part of the discussion here today is to understand, yes, we need to adjust to the economic reality that we're in, but it's also to keep an eye towards the future of what is the opportunity. So for instance, in 2001, I'd argue the internet, even though it was going much before that pretty strong, it sort of, there's a lot of investment during that time. And then you sort of saw after that, it really went to a new level. And obviously today, commerce on the internet is, how we do business. And then you go to 2008, which was an incredibly, incredibly tough time. And you think about all of the sort of companies that were created around cloud and shifting to the cloud. And it probably was due to some of the economic challenges at that time. And then you go to 2020 and, obviously COVID sparked this whole new thing of remote work. And I don't know what the next big change is going to be, but I would postulate one of the things that in 2022 with sort of the Ukraine war and inflation, it's going to be much more of a global workforce. So we are now going to be really one workforce, one world economy in a much more significant way than we have been before. And what kind of opportunity is that going to create for folks, right? So I think part of this is understanding that there is a lot of economic challenge right now, understanding how to deal with that, but then also keeping an eye towards the future of what could be a fundamental shift in the market or in your business that you could take advantage of.
It's such a big point. If you look at 2001 and just before, you're looking at really the growth of the Googles and the Amazons of the world that really kind of made their way. at around that time. If you look at 2008, that's when the Ubers and the Airbnbs kind of made their way. And if you look at the remote work, we all know, in addition to the JumpClouds of the world, but the Zooms of the world and others kind of just really, really prospered during that. So whenever there's something really bad and troubling going on in the world, there's also an opportunity. And this is a great chart, and it really does highlight the potential opportunity. And let me hand it over to Michelle, because
But I think, maybe Raj, and I think Chase, we had a slide on this and just like some of the things you think about, just, if you want to flop to that next slide. I think a lot of the things we think about in business is really like, going back to those basics, right? How do you deal with a difficult economy, right? And, I think Raj laid this out really well, right? It is really about knowing your people, your process, your tools, really knowing what's a priority for your business. I think ruthless prioritization, that focus is really critical, and being great executors, right? I think if you're trying to do too many things, particularly in a difficult economy, I think that's where things get really, really tough.
Yeah, I think this helps sets the stage for really the juicy question, right? So how do we deal with recessions so you're thinking in your organizations, your IT teams, how to prepare? We're kind of talking through this playbook a little bit, and Raj, I'd love to kind of maybe dissect some of these components a little bit further in terms of your approach, right? And two, what's changed, what's been modified over the years through some tough lessons.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the most important thing is focus, is understanding what's most important for your organization, where you want to go, and really sort of coalescing the team around that. So I'd say that's sort of the Uber message, if you will, or meta message is, hey, you have to be incredibly focused. Not that, in good times you shouldn't be focused as well, but I think it's easier to have, let's say, more bets to place during good times. And then during tough times, I think you just have to narrow that focus and be really great at whatever it is that you do. So, the model we have here is really, assess, really understand your business, your world. What does that look like? Figure out what's the most important thing, gain that alignment around the team, because ultimately nothing gets done without a team. So making sure everybody in the team really believes in that mission and what you're focused on. And then once you've got everybody aligned, then you're there to execute, and I think it sort of works out pretty well. And I don't think tough times need to be so scary in terms of it's not possible to navigate them. Of course it's possible to navigate them. Lots of great organizations have done that. It just takes a lot of discipline, a lot of effort. So I think this is a simple model. I'm sure there's many other models people could create, but this one is as good as I think any to think about, or at least discuss whether it would work for somebody.
Yeah, I'd add one thing to this, which is customer. It's really being focused on what the customer absolutely needs, both existing and new, and not focus, but focus explicitly on the customer and what they need, and then of course the things that keep you going. And obviously, one of the things that we've done is to look at, for bigger companies, when they're spending money in IT, what goes away during recessions, and what persists during recessions. And interestingly, every single CIO of a large company that we spoke with said the one thing that cannot be touched is cyber, which I thought was interesting. It's like every one of them had the same comment, in fact, which was that, at least for big companies now, to reduce by a nickel their budget for cyber, they would need to get not only CEO approval, but board approval to do it. So they take it very seriously. And I don't see why that should be any different, independent of size of customer.
And I think that's a good transition point. So Michelle, loved your perspective. So in uncertain times, like the scrutinization of IT costs, right, whether they're cyber or not, how do you evaluate technology purchases, or what are their particular areas that you look after?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it still goes back to, what Raj was talking about in that model, and that's really figuring out what you have to succeed as a business. And I think first off, you have to do that ruthless prioritization to make sure you're only working on those critical things that drive you through the uncertainty. So before you even think about spending a dime on technology purchases, you have to think about what do you get rid of that's not critical, that's not driving productivity or value creation or not cutting down on work. So once you've kind of done that prioritization, then I think for me, it's pretty simple. I'm big on looking for processes and tools that are really multi-purposes. Like I like Swiss Army knives, right? In these times. I think if you've got a tool that can solve multiple challenges or pain points, particularly if they do that across more than one team, they're super valuable, particularly in uncertain times when, you know, IT costs get under scrutiny. A great example, and I'm kind of tool agnostic, but I'll just use this as an example. Atlassian, right? We commonly think about using that for ticketing by engineering teams, but you can take tools like Jira and Confluence and you use it in other teams that need workflows or project management or communication platforms. I've used it in finance for approval workflows and things like that. I'm not a big fan of point solutions, so I do my best to try to avoid any of those or things that lock you into a single ecosystem, right? I like tools that can be flexible no matter what other tools I use in the future. I think in uncertain times, you need that operational flexibility for your business. So you have to choose partners who respect that, particularly if you're still growing and scaling. And I think platforms that have multiple APIs into a broad range of other platforms are also critical. And then I really say, you know, this is a time to look to business partners who are flexible on pricing and terms. Don't be afraid to renegotiate with your vendors. And don't be afraid to give something to get something. If you got a vendor you're really happy with and you know you're in it for the long haul, like go back to the table and renegotiate. Be willing to give them a little bit longer contract in exchange for better pricing. They're looking to lock in through times of uncertainty too.
Interesting. Okay, well, now let's flip it a little bit. So kind of coming back to Gary's point of when we're taking that critical eye, we're looking at all the key, you know, focus areas where it either is introducing friction or it's not providing as much value as we'd hoped when we had made that investment. What are some of the areas that you continue to invest in, regardless of the economic environment that's unfolding, right? So we mentioned cyber as one, but what are some of the elements of that you look for to make sure that, you know, we're future-proofing the organization?
Yeah, I'd boil it down to three really critical things for me. I think first is automation. I mean, part of challenges and, you know, as we think about, you know, this economy, and if you look at all those downturn cycles we talked about, you know, the first thing companies focus on is not expanding your talent pool. Well, you still have work to get done and you still want to grow. So how do you do that efficiently and effectively? And to me, that's automation. So that to me is a number one priority. Enablement. This is when you need to make your teams their most productive, right? Because we need to get the most out of every single team and every single person. So figure out what those groups need to be successful to do the jobs and those priorities that you've chosen for the business. And then Gary's going to love this one, compliance and security. I mean, I think those are timeless priorities. And so I think particularly in a tough economy, that's not the place you cut back on. So I use that kind of those three lenses to think about where I'd invest. And then if I think about what I invest in, you know, I still think at our core, we need really strong HRIS systems, and you want one that's got APIs into a lot of different things. So again, it might be connecting to your IT systems, might be connecting to your financial systems. You need kind of a unified platform and one that can do multiple things. I think financial and data analysis tools are also really, really critical. You know, you don't want to expand your finance profile or just your G&A profile in times of uncertainty, but you do want to make them more productive, and great tools can do that. And then finally, I really think those foundational IT tools to manage identity and access to give you those security layers so that that most basic hygiene layer is covered. I think
we know someone that can do that.
I know somebody who can do that. And happy to have a conversation if anybody wants to know that same company that can do that. But
you know, I'd add one thing again, Chase, which is that we always have to remember that in strange times and recessionary times, if we have it, and we should talk about that, as much as kind of we think we're playing defense, so are our competitors. And so this can be a time to really kind of make the difference and figure out the thing that is the single most important thing that can differentiate you from your competitors with your customers. Something that makes it easier for your customers, something that makes them more productive, and really hone in on that and use this time to do that while your competitors are kind of really playing defense. This can be your time to do that. So it's worth thinking about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Gary, at our board meeting, we had a great analogy to this recently, right? So basically, you know, in good times in sort of racing and F1
Yes.
racing, apparently there was a quote that, you know, it's pretty tough to pass one car on a sunny day, but
Yes.
in the rain you can pass 15 cars. And so, you know, the meta message there is, you know, for everybody on the line here today is that, you know, assess who your competitors are, assess what your customers need. And, you know, some of your competitors are going to pull back so much that you can actually overtake them because they're afraid of, you know, hitting that wall, if you will, or spinning out. But, you know, you may know what needs to happen and you've got a lot more confidence and you can go make that happen. And so I think for a lot of our customers and our partners, there is a huge opportunity to kind of double down and do a great job with their customers and their teams and things like that. So I think obviously I started this panel by saying I'm an optimist in general, and I think even in tough times there are ways that you can succeed, and that quote was kind of a great example of that.
It's a great one. It's a great one. You know, there is the general question of whether or not, you know, just how tough things will get. That we could potentially talk about. I mean, this is not at all 2007, 2008. You know, I remember back then that there was a fear we're going back to sticks and stones, that, you know, that there was going to be no technology, there was going to be nothing, because, and the fundamental problem back then was that the debt levels, and this, I hate to get so macro, but the debt levels of consumers, of businesses, and of banks was all way excessive, because there was a view that assets would continue to grow in value to the sky. And so when they came down, all three of those groups, but particularly the banks that were levered really 30 pieces of debt to one piece of equity. I mean, just, it was insane how over levered all of the financial service companies were globally. And so that really precipitated real concern about whether or not the economy could go forward, and a whole lot of pain that everyone had to incur. That is not the case now. With banks, they're highly regulated to have very low debt levels as a percent of equity. Corporations are quite flush with cash, and their net debt position is actually quite low relative to their assets and equity. And consumers are actually pretty well off as well. And so, you know, there's a concern out there that if the Fed raises interest rates due to inflation, that everyone's going to, you know, topple on their interest costs and their debt costs and not be able to pay back. And while that may happen to some, and I don't want to say it's not going to happen to anybody, but on average, it's going to be far less penal than it was in the 07, 08 timeframe. And there's reason to believe that we won't really have a very big recession, because most big recessions are started by very excessive debt levels, if you go back over history, and we don't have that today. So that is actually the good news. It's strange that even in this time where we are technically in recession, just based on what was announced this morning, in terms of 2 GDP reductions in a row is technically a recession, but we're at near full employment. And it's not often that you have those two things. And so it is a stranger time than usual, and one that might actually make people feel less overly concerned than they might.
So you're an optimist too, Gary.
I'm a big optimist like you are, Raj. You have to be. You have to be. How else do you get up in the morning?
That's right.
You know?
You have to be. Well, I guess to continue on that theme, and so I mean, the best way of knowing when a recession is over is, again, someone else tells it, right, that it has ended, you know, 6 months ago. What does the types of conversations we have with our teams in terms of how we should, you know, to combine analogies, right? So how should we come in for a pit stop, making sure that we are ready to execute and, you know, continue to drive in the rain, but then what are some of the things that you're looking for? Say, okay, well, it's starting to be a little bit more sunny out. It's starting to be some of those things. And how does that shift any of, I'd say, the considerations, some of the models that we've talked about already in terms of getting ready, but then also, you know, planning ahead. So another 6, 9 months, 12 months, whatever that time might be, making sure that we are well positioned to execute in the future.
So I'm going to try it, not having really thought this through all the way, but I'll take a shot. Look, I think the most important thing that we have to decide, not decide, but figure out, and everyone's going to have their own opinion on, is what happens to inflation. And the reason is that if you think that inflation is going to come back down quickly, then interest rates are going to stay low. And if interest rates stay low, then cash is going to be cheap. And we're not going to go back to the way things were a year ago or 2 years ago, but something much more friendly than they are right now. Now, there's enormous uncertainty around that. And so what most companies that we see are doing is saying, look, we don't know. And no one knows. I don't even think the Fed knows exactly how the world's going to evolve in terms of inflation and in terms of unemployment and all those things. So I think what most companies are doing, both large and small, is managing cash more carefully than they were over the last 2 years, where money was basically free for so many different companies. And so that's what we're seeing with our companies, is that every single one of them is saying, look, I don't know what kind of I just don't know what kind of funding environment there's going to be. I don't know what debt costs are going to be. I don't know what anything is. So I want to really preserve cash for as long a period of time as I can. So that's what most companies are doing, while still trying to grow to the greatest extent possible. But if you go back a year from now, people are saying, I'm going to grow at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's much more of a balance between growth and cash is what we're seeing with almost every company we work with.
I'll jump in, Gary, from there. I think, you know, I go back to focus, right? So it's sort of, everything sort of starts there. And I think for everybody on the webinar here today, I think it's super powerful if you're focused on what are the core priorities that you have, why those are important. Make sure everybody around you understands that, and use that as sort of the mechanism to go forward here. Right, in good times, bad times, it doesn't really matter. Focus is one of those things that you can always go back to, and maybe in this sort of more uncertain time, if you want to call it that, is that the focus kind of gets a little bit narrower. You focus on, you know, a few less things, do those really well. Make sure that your customers, whether they're internal customers or external customers, feel that better service or better product that you're delivering. And then as you see success, you can continue to expand. But I think focus is probably the name of the game right now, really, especially when it comes to IT. IT gets tasked with doing a million different things, and it's just not possible to do everything if you don't have all the budget and all the people, and you're not going to have all the budget and all the people in uncertain times. So really narrowing to, these are the services that we're going to provide. These are the core things that need to happen. Here's how it's going to help the organization. Here's how it's going to help our customer, whether that's internal or external. And I think if you do that, you'll be in good shape kind of moving forward, I think.
I completely agree with that. I would add one more thing, which is, if you go back a year or two ago, it was incredibly difficult to hire really good talent in technology. And it was really hard, frankly, to hold on to really good talent because demand so exceeded the supply of great talent. With a slight slowdown, it's going to be easier to get great talent, and frankly, easier to hold on to great talent. And so having your eye out for finding great new talent right now is actually, I would think, a great time to find real new talent.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of things going on in this environment, which is you are going to look for a great talent. You're also going to look for it in in cost advantage places, right? So when I talk about like the
Absolutely.
global economy, global workforce, it is amazing how that is changing, where people are finding amazing talent and resources all across the globe in places that we probably had never imagined that would become hotspots for technology, for finance, for customer support, for whatever it might be. I mean, it's truly amazing how global organizations are becoming, and ultimately that cost disparity is helping people grow. It is helping them continue to invest in providing economic opportunity elsewhere, but also making sure that an organization, say based in the US, is still able to be successful.
Very true.
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
add that I think, our IT admins on this call too are in that unique position of really being able to go back to those three principles of automation, enablement, and security, and help their companies navigate this time by helping them think that way about the tools that they manage and providing them good thoughts on, how do we make everybody more productive? How do we make our organization more sustainable, more scalable through this? The great thing I think about automation and, whether that's, you know, tools or whether that's robotics, process automation, any of those kind of things, even using, machine learning and AI and things, those are all going to, machines will be working 24 hours while we're sleeping and doing other things, right? And I think if you can bring those opportunities to your business teams to think about how do you bring scale to the company for future growth and plant those seeds now, you are going to be able to help the business come out of a recession stronger and more resilient and able to scale maybe more quickly than your competitors. So use your positions to your advantage to really be the champion and the advocate for those kind of tools that focus on those three core priorities.
Absolutely. And I think when you have those elements that are coming into it, it's on an ongoing basis, right? This isn't just a one-time thing, and there's a continuation of this. And I think one of the key elements to making that a reality, so kind of moving from assessing and focusing within the organization into kind of the execution, is the communication of that. And so when, so perhaps Michelle, for your perspective, when you're investing in some areas of the business, while at the same time others might be seeing decreases or changes, how should IT leaders and leaders across the organization be communicating these changes to their teams?
Yeah, I think I'm big on you do it frequently, you do it transparently, and you do it authentically. I don't think you try to sugarcoat things. I think you want to have a little bit of the optimism that we see Gary and Raj have, and I'm an optimist too. But you need to be transparent about what the reality of the situation is. You need to give them thoughts about how to navigate that and how to make those trade-offs and that prioritization work for them and for their organization. And again, you have to keep focusing on why is it important to do this now? I mean, I think making those tough choices now creates a resiliency in companies that will persist and take you through the other side of the challenge. So rallying your teams around that purpose of, again, creating that focus, creating that great execution during this time so that you're stronger and more resilient on the other side of it's really important. But again, with communication, the bottom line is often. Like you cannot communicate messages enough.
I'd also add,
Please,
let me jump in, Gary, for just 1 second.
please,
So
please.
I also think that just because you're an optimist doesn't mean that you're not direct. So I think there's some things that can kind of get lost. It's like, hey, we're optimistic, so we're not really going to share the whole story, or we're not going to be decisive, or we're not going to just say no to some things. And I think times of uncertainty are an absolutely great opportunity to say no to things. And it's so often that we don't really take that opportunity to say, no, we're not going to do that project. Or, you know what, I know that you really want this thing from me, but I just can't deliver it for you and I can't be successful at it. So I'm going to say no to it. Like I think it's a real opportunity for organizations and IT organizations especially to just say, hey, not right now. Like, I understand that you need this. I just can't get to it. It's not going to be done well. Here's the things that we are going to do well. And I would encourage everybody to use this as an opportunity to shrink that focus, do a great job with the things that you have on your plate, but not try and overextend yourself, especially in a tight economy where you aren't going to probably get those resources that you're looking for. So Gary, sorry about that. Go ahead and jump in.
No, I know I was going to take the not the other side of that at all, but just to add to and really accentuate the point that Michelle made, which I thought was dead on, which is the word advocacy, which is that one way to think about great IT people are the people that not just manage what's in their direct responsibility, but are able to go to the other people, the sales leader, the engineering leader, the software leader, whatever, product leader, and basically come up with ideas for them to use technology that they may not know about in order to be productive. I think the advocacy piece, because the tech people tend to know a lot more about technology than the other folks. And so taking on that leadership role of advocacy and assistance and idea generation with the other functional leaders is a very, very big opportunity as a way to drive productivity inside the company and growth.
Right. And in order to have more impact and more influence across the whole organization. This is why I think IT and this whole area has become perhaps one of the most important departments in an organization. It's at the center of just about everything now.
Hey, Raj, I think that's a good point. And what I've seen great IT organizations and great IT admins do is they have a unique visibility to platform usage and they can see that. And I think this is a great time to say, hey, guess what? We actually have, we have 2 electronic signing platforms that we're using. Can we consolidate to one? We're using 3 different kinds of communication tools. Would we be better served if we picked one and we went deeper on one? We have unused licenses. We have this, but we were paying for 300 licenses, but I did an analysis and I'm only seeing utilization of 50. I think this is a great opportunity to use the tools and the techniques that you have as an IT admin to say, are we actually using the tools we have efficiently? And if we're not using them efficiently, like I said at the beginning, we need to get them out of the system. And I think so it's a great opportunity for you to play that housekeeping role because you have that unique perspective on the things people touch and what gets used in the system.
I think that's great. Let's continue down kind of within that level. And I think maybe just, continue to add on to it. So for example, Raj, you speak with a number of customers daily. What are some of the patterns and trends that you're hearing across the JumpCloud community?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the JumpCloud community, I'd say it's 3 things. So efficiency, number 1, everybody wants to get it more efficient. So, whether that's automation, whether that's, making sure that people are being productive, enablement, all the things that Michelle talked about earlier. Efficiency is absolutely number 1. I'd say number 2 is basically tool consolidation. We're in the respect of JumpCloud itself, our platform, we're sort of this open independent identity layer, and we are introducing a number of different products and services. And those products, people are looking for us to take other categories of tools, have them consolidated into our platform so that they don't have to pay another vendor or have yet another integration point or another tool that they've got to manage. And frankly, another contractual relationship, another person that needs to be an expert in that tool inside the organization, all those things. So, tool consolidation has, kind of downstream impacts that are pretty significant that I think we're hearing a lot about right now. And then the other thing I hear constantly is, look, security and compliance is mandatory. I think almost every organization on the planet now is regulated in some way. Like we're on the hook for something at this point in time. And so making that easier, making it more efficient, making it less expensive is what I'm hearing from our customers. How can you just bake in that level of security and compliance that we need to have by law in some places, and if not by law, by de facto standard, because we're not going to get customers if we don't have that level of security and compliance. So those are, I think, the 3 top things I hear. I'd say meta issue that we're hearing from our customers too is be a partner with us, right? So work with us. How can you go deeper and help us? How can we take advantage of what we've bought better? How can you help make sure that we're becoming successful? So those are wonderful conversations for us to have with our customers. And I think frankly, for any organization to have with their customers or for them to have with their partners and vendors. So have those conversations, call us up and say, hey, how can I leverage you guys more? How can I automate more things? How can I get, more tightly aligned with you? I mean, for, one maybe more tactical example is we've spent a tremendous amount of time on HRIS integration. Everybody has a payroll system. Now, we are trying to integrate with as many of those payroll systems as we can and benefit systems so that you take a step out of the equation. And that's a big step of, when you onboard somebody or deprovision somebody, that's a lot of work. And so to the extent that we can integrate those two tools together and make it more seamless, that's a huge win. And we don't charge for that. That's not a paid for feature in our platform. It's included in every single Cloud Directory account that we have. So, that's a great example of like, let's get on the phone and let's see if your payroll system works with ours or how we can help enable it to work with our platform, and hopefully you can see the benefits of that.
And you're partnered with most of the HRIS firms.
We're partnered
already
with a number of the HRIS systems. So, obviously folks like Workday and Bamboo HR, namely Gusto, HiBob, Personio. There's, many of them. And then we have open APIs that, so if we're not partnered with them, maybe we can create something with you so that there is an integration so that you save a lot of time and energy, get better results overall. But I think that's a great example of something that everybody that uses JumpCloud has that included. So how can we help you enable that so that you're able to save time and money?
Yeah. Well, with that, I wanted to pull kind of the first question from the audience that we got, and then so for everyone listening in, please throw in some more questions from that. The first question, would you agree that saying yes to every request overextends yourself and the team, and it leads to a certain level of failure?
I think Raj already addressed that. Go for it.
Yeah, 100%. Like I mean, look, I know we all in life want to please people. Like we want to be liked. We want people to feel like, hey, we're good, a good person, good human. We like you, we care about you, and people want that same. But I think, just saying yes to everything does not lead to that, even though we think it might. In fact, I think it's worse, right? Because you end up disappointing so many people because you can't deliver. I think one of the most important things, especially in IT, because IT is one of those functions where it's everybody is talking to them. Everybody's asking for something. Everybody needs something. I think you got to put in systems, processes. I think you've got to say no to things. And no doesn't mean no forever. It just means no for right now, and we'll reevaluate. But I think that no, I think you drive a lot of respect when you say, I can't get to this. I'm not going to be successful with it.
I think you used the right, real quick, I think you used exactly the right word, which is process, which is you need to set up a process inside your company where things get budgeted at a certain time of year. Now, maybe you do that every quarter, or you revisit it every quarter, or revisit every half year or every year. But you got to say, like, this is the capacity we have from a dollars and a resource point of view. Let's all decide as a company as to how that gets spent, and maybe even have a little bit of a slush fund of money set aside for the things that come up, and then we'll have an ad hoc way of deciding it. But to Raj's point, the word process is unfortunately the only way to get through this without pissing everyone off. I think that's right.
I think, yeah, Chase, what we talked about, if you remember at the all company meeting we had last week, I think is because we want to say yes, I'm trying to get people to think of how do you say yes and the and part is where you say, yes, I want to help you with that. And what will we not do to enable our team and your team to have the time to make that happen? Yes, and what are we willing to give up in the future in our set of things we wanted to buy in order to enable you to buy this tool if you want to do this? Yes, and how will we make this a repeatable process for the next person who wants to do it? So I think if you feel compelled to say yes, don't be afraid to say yes and set those criteria that will help you manage that work too. It's a way to partner without taking too much of that burden on yourself in keeping everybody's expectations realistic.
Absolutely. So the next question we have coming in, kind of bringing in a little bit more of the human element. Are you seeing an increase in the number of applicants to open roles in companies, right? As staff changes continue to change, as IT talent becomes a little bit easier to find, still tough. But I'd love to kind of have our take, but then also Gary, and see if you're starting to see some of that across some of the other portfolio companies.
So I'll start. Yeah, the short answer is yes. For any open role that we have, we're seeing more applicants than we had in the past. And I think that's obviously a function of a lot of things. You know, the market is loosening up a little bit, if you will. There are layoffs going on elsewhere. I think there's also a lot of people who are feeling uncertain at their organization. And, you know, so I think that's probably some of the drivers. I mean, I'd say, just as a side comment on this, you know, going back to Michelle's thing of communication, if you're an organization and you've got people that work for you or around your team, communicate like crazy, especially during this time, about, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. Here's our thought process. Here's the algorithm that we're using on how we're going to make decisions. The more you can share with that, the more you're going to retain your top talent, which I think, you know, obviously you want to do at any point in time.
So yeah, I'd say there's two things going on. To Raj's point, there is some loosening going on. One is that companies that are trying to preserve cash now because of the uncertainty out there are not hiring as much, and in some cases, to Raj's point, are doing layoffs. And there's a second piece which affects some companies more than others, which is that because not to get too financial about it, but because stock prices for public companies are so down relative to where they are, there's a lot of people that have kind of given up hope of being quote unquote in the money in their companies and are now freeing up and are available to be hired as well. So both they're related but different, but both are causing people to be freed up. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think we've talked a lot about, so I guess just to switch gears again, we'll add in kind of another perspective of what this might look like. We've talked a lot about kind of the tactics and the playbooks and processes for IT teams to implement. But now kind of shifting over a little bit and thinking about managed service providers of the world. Mm-hmm. Should they be doing the same? Should be, you know, doubling down in certain areas, or would we have different advice for them?
I'll jump in there, Chase. I think managed service providers, and many of them are our partners, have an incredible opportunity, right? So it's not only an opportunity with their existing clients to really shape kind of what their next IT strategy is going to be at their customers, but I think you've got a whole cadre of companies that are looking to get more effective, cost-effective, efficient IT delivered. That's a customer base waiting to happen for them. So, you know, if I were in their shoes of being an MSP out there, I think you've got a massive opportunity to go to the market and say, hey, we can make you more efficient. We can enable your teams to be more successful. We can make sure you're secure and compliant, easier, cheaper, better than you can yourself. Come have a conversation with us. So this goes back to, you know, on a rainy day, you can pass 15 cars. For MSPs, my belief is, you know, you should be able to really drive a lot of customer adoption during this time, because you are going to be better at it. That's what you do for a living. You have all of this infrastructure. You have all this process already built in. You can do a great job way more cost effectively than an organization can internally. And you should go talk about that with a lot of clients. And I think you're going to have a lot of success.
Raj said much better than I would have, but I wholeheartedly agree with him. I would add one word to it, which is what an MSP gives a smaller company that's growing is even more flexibility too. So they not only make them more productive with better tools, but they also, look, let's suppose you were planning on growing 30% and now you're only going to grow 10%. Well, they'll adjust what they offer to you, or you're going to grow 80%. You know, they'll adjust what they offer to you based on, and in a way that's much more in line with what your needs are than you having to do it on your own. And so that's a major plus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess too, kind of thinking about it from a financial perspective, right? Because not only have the burden of kind of making sure that there's an open tool set, but also trying to run a business on top of that as well. I want to see if you had additional perspective as kind of MSPs are starting to think about this and you know, evaluate how they're approaching this as they enter in the second half of the year.
So I'll take one quick shot at it.
Yeah.
As an MSP, I think there's, I mean, to Roger's point, the opportunity is amazing right now. And I would be more aggressive from a sales point of view now than almost at any time, just because of the uncertainty out there. MSPs are to my point before, MSPs are a wonderful, wonderful solution in a world of uncertainty. Just because they can surge up or down with you. And so I would be very aggressive from a sales point of view. I'd make deals and anything, and I'd get customers with you, and more the better.
The benefits of a managed service provider right now will resonate more than at any other time. I think it's
that's right.
not that it's not, during good times it's not a good thing. Of course it's a great thing, but it's going to resonate even more today. But I would also say for MSPs internally, I would be going through the same process that we've been advocating here. Focus, find things that, can be efficient, work on your process, work on your tool set, work on your people. Like all those things also apply, right? There's no reason, in fact, that you can't be probably even more profitable and more productive and more efficient as an MSP today. So I think all those things apply as well.
I would add one other thing, which, having spent some time in the MSP space, is, first of all, there's two different kinds of MSPs. There's the resellers of software, and then there's the people that are effectively outsourced IT shops. I think particularly the outsourced IT shops are there's an incredible opportunity for them in this world because of the flexibility and savings. The second thing I'd say is that for almost anything an MSP wants to do, there is an IT solution out there. There is a supplier that has software that can solve their needs, both for their internal productivity as well as for their customers. And so I would even more so than usual, I would encourage MSPs to rely on software packages for their needs rather than building anything on their own.
Oh yeah, especially at this time. There's no reason to build. There's
right.
so much.
There's so much out.
Yeah, and obviously there's integration work that needs to happen, or customization, but a lot of people will help you with that. So yeah, I think I couldn't imagine taking the time to build from scratch in this stage, of the market. Chase, I think there's a couple folks that may want to jump on live, so I don't know if you want to open it up or what's the next.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's, a couple things. One is we can start a quick poll. And so if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat if you're not able to hop off live, and we'll see if we can get that wired up.
Great. Do we know how to get, if people just want to come off mute, is that the way that they do it, Chase?
They should on the side.
Make sure that can happen.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I'll actually ask Dora on the back end.
Yep.
Unmute them. Perfect. I think we'll race through it if you want to raise your hand. Looks like we have Ricky as well as Don.
Okay, great.
Hi, Ricky.
We can't hear Ricky yet.
There we go.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Ricky, how are you?
I thought we were doing Morse code.
Real well. Oh yeah, it's my first time using a webinar software. No, I'm just kidding. Just want to send a short note. We kind of on some of our struggles when I first implemented JumpCloud was during the start of COVID back in March 2020. But that's when a lot of budgets were kind of constrained for us. We're not the largest company, but at the same time, 130 users at that time was a good size expense for us and so forth. And presenting that to our board and saying, hey, we're going to go with this. This is what's going to help us be remote. Let's do this today. So that really helped us in the relation with JumpCloud and gave us a good impression of the product. But Also, I love seeing all the new roadmap stuff with new products. Michelle mentioned consolidating, unifying items together. That's important for us. At times when our budgets are once again being constrained, so we're able to bring other products in house, whether it's password management or other things inside remote management and so forth. So kudos to everybody on that. Only critique I'd say is pricing model for service accounts. I've got about 15 SSO only users I need to do for our Ship Hero iPads, but other than that, very happy camper here.
Thanks, Ricky. Yeah, and we'll, if you want to reach out to us, we'll figure out how to make sure that we take care of pricing issues on that to make sure you're comfortable with that. Absolutely.
I appreciate it, Rush.
Yeah. Don, I think you might be up next.
Yep. So Don, just unmuted if you wanted to either add in the previous question. If not, can do.
Particularly if you have something nice to say about JumpCloud, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. It was my question about saying yes to every request that comes to you, and I know I've myself and the team I've been on have basically been victims of this. Where we've had management come and the team, let's say, can handle 10 projects, but we've got requests for 15. And so, we've overextended ourselves and in some cases have not been able to work on projects or gotten to a point where the quality of the work had decreased. So, I think it's a good point, and the panel there did a good job in answering, my question and giving some insight to it. So I want to thank them all for that.
Don, I think, anytime you have, and management's often guilty of this, and leaders are often guilty of this, right? And we sometimes think, oh, we can handle all these different things, but I think it's incumbent upon everybody to push back and say, hey, look, I know you want all these things, but they're not going to get done well. And I think what you're interested in is you want things done well. What are those things that you want done really well? And we'll do those really well. And we just can't get to everything. And at some point, there has to be some reality check there, because even if they say to you, oh no, do everything, the truth is not everything's going to get done. So do you want to live in reality that only a certain amount of things are going to get done, or do you want to live in a fantasy land of I said everything's going to get done, therefore it's going to get everything's going to get done, and it's just not true, right? So I think those are hard conversations on occasion, but I think everybody's going to end up in a better spot when they say, here's the reality of what we're trying to do, and here's what we can do a great job with.
Yeah, I'd say this is a great opportunity to, you need to treat the requests you got just like we treat, product feature prioritization or whatever it is, right? Keep that running list. Say, hey, periodically, I want to sit down with you and let's prioritize. I just got 15 things. To make all of those happen, I need either 3 more people or this to happen or whatever. If you want to enable that, great, then I can do your 15 things. If we don't want to enable those things to make the 15 things happen, tell me which of the 15 is most important. Let's stack rank this and let's keep looking at that list. And if you put a new thing on the list, great, pull out that old list and say, great, where is this going to fit in the stack rank? And which things do we deprioritize to make that happen? Unless you want to go back over to the other page where we say, here's the resources we add to make that happen. I think if you can have that objective, unemotional conversation that, yes, those things are possible, they're just possible with a different set of resources and time. So how do we prioritize what we have with the resources and time we're willing to live with?
Yeah, I think all that's true, and it's easy for us to sit here and say that, and sometimes the culture of the company doesn't quite have that.
Right.
And it's hard because if they haven't had a process before, and I think all 3 of us are suggesting you need some kind of process by which things get filtered at a certain time of year and then other stuff gets agreed to or not. But either you gotta, I mean, I think the way to do this is to either have a one-on-one with either the person running the company or with the person running the finance. So either the Rajas of the world or the Michelles of the world, either the CEO or the CFO.
Or both.
Or both. But we need to have some kind of process or else no one's going to be happy.
Yeah, we talk at JumpCloud, we talk a lot about just, manage up, right? And again, the culture has to be open to that. But here's my week, here's what it looks like, here are my blocks of time of what I'm going to spend doing what do you want to take away because you just added these 3 things, I can't do them in this block of time. And Don, I don't know if your culture is open to those kinds of conversations, but hopefully it is, because ultimately if it's not, I find it hard to believe that it's going to be a long-term successful organization.
Unfortunately, too many cultures is, look, the IT guys should just get it done. Just go get it done, right? And if you don't get it done, it's your fault, those companies don't succeed, and the people in IT in those companies don't succeed. It's got to be a collaborative way in which process.
Well, you saw this at massive scale, Gary, right? So, and that, I'm sure that was a culture change that you had to introduce at GE, across hundreds of thousands of people.
And I'd say I was modestly successful at best. At best. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because what you're basically saying, I can't do all this by myself. I need all of us in this together. And you have to admit that up front and then say, now let's figure out together how to make this work.
Absolutely. We'd like to thank all of you for sharing your thoughts, perspectives as we approach this topic. And so as we near the top of the hour, I'd love to just grab closing thoughts from each one of you for our audience.
Raj, you want to?
Sure, I am happy to start. So I'll start, or I'll end with what I started with, which is I think there's great opportunity in difficult times too. And that opportunity does not have to be economic opportunity. That opportunity could be, how can we do things better? How can we be more efficient? How can we have more success with the things that we're doing? So I would look for those wins, right? Even in a difficult economy, in a strange time, if you want to call it that, look for those wins. Look for things that you think can be successes for you and your organization.
And I would go back to something I said, which is that this is a time when your competitors are probably on the back of their feet as well. So look for ways you can get some quick, easy, and powerful wins with your customers by doing something to product or service using technology that can really get you ahead of your competition.
Yeah, and I just encourage you all to use your positions where you have that insight and ability to be a thought leader and a partner to the rest of the management team and say, hey, I'm seeing these opportunities for us to be better. Here's a tool that would make you more effective. Here's usage statistics that tell us we're not using the tools we have. Let's rethink this profile. I think lean into that advisory role that you play. Don't just do what people ask you to do. Bring them suggestions on how to make them more efficient, more scalable, more resilient.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for sharing your perspectives, all the tactics, playbooks that we've discussed to make this a reality for the JumpCloud community. I'd like to thank everyone who's listening in for joining us today and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Chase. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.